Chapter 1431. 4 cycles of 60 years. The feng shui compass flew out and merged with the cushion under Su Ming. When the ground in the cave abode seemed to have turned into a huge feng shui compass, and the space whip flew to Su Ming to turn into a red thread around his right wrist, the mountain around the cave abode began trembling. Booming sounds rose and fell, and in the millions of mountains in the southwestern region of ancient Zong, it felt like an earthquake had descended. The mountains swayed violently, rocks fell, and dust flew, making it look like there was a huge sleeping dragon under the mountains. At that moment, the dragon had woken up and was shaking off the dust and earth that had settled on its body in the passage of time, which was why the place looked as if the mountains were about to shatter and the ground about to crumble. Loud booming sounds shook the sky and earth. In the blink of an eye, many mountains collapsed. Dust clouds filled the sky and earth, and the expressions of the thousands of people from Seven Moons sect led by Xu Zhongfan turned anxious. At that moment, the sects and clans beyond the mountains noticed the abnormality in the area. Long arcs charged over with loud whistles in their wake. While Xu Zhongfan was feeling anxious, a white light suddenly flew out of the cave with its gaze fixated upon them. In that light was not Su Ming, but a large white dog. It approached Xu Zhongfan, and an old voice immediately spoke in Xu Zhongfan's heart. The young master has a message. He will not be able to come out of the place for the time being. Please go back to Seven Moons sect on your own. Once he comes out, he will go to all of you in Seven Moons sect. Once the white dog sent the message through a divine thought, it turned around and returned to the cave. At the instant it flew back, a loud bang shot into the sky from the cave. Shattered rocks tumbled inside, and the cave collapsed. Hesitation appeared on Xu Zhongfan's face, but when he saw the mountains swaying, and the runes unable to stop that even when all of them were fully activated, he made his decision. As the mountains collapsed and numerous cracks appeared near where they had laid down their relocation rune, Xu Zhongfan gritted his teeth and swung his arm. Once the cracks spread to the relocation rune, all of them would be unable to leave, and the abnormality in the place had already attracted the attention of the sects and clans in the area. Before long, many of them would rush over. And hence, to preserve the secrets in the place. Seven Moons sect disciples, we leave now. At his order, the thousands of people charged into the rune. At the instant light shone from the relocation rune, they all disappeared without a trace. The moment they vanished, long arcs from all directions could be seen in the distance. Those cultivators had seen the light from the relocation rune, but they had not gotten a glimpse of the faces of who had left. When the people from Seven Moons sect left, the mountain where the relocation rune was collapsed, and the rune shattered to pieces, making it impossible for others to reverse the process of the relocation and drag back the people who had left. Immediately after, the rune Seven Moons sect had set in the area self-destructed simultaneously. When booming sounds echoed in the air, all traces of Seven Moons sect were completely destroyed. The booms formed by the self-destruction of the runes were connected with the tremors of the mountains, and dust clouds filled every inch of air in the area. Soon, more cultivators arrived, but few of them ventured into the dust fog. They only stood in the air and stared at the mountains in surprise and bewilderment. Then, powerful Dao paragons from those sects and clans arrived and conducted detailed investigations. But only when the tremors in the mountains gradually calmed down after 3 days did they begin searching through the area for clues. But in the end, they found nothing and could only leave with hearts filled with various guesses. Hence, even more detailed investigations were conducted, and they lasted for months before they slowly dying out. In time, no cultivators from any sects or clans paid any attention to the mountains anymore. The matter of nearly 3/10 of the mountains in the southwestern region of ancient Zong suddenly collapsing had become an enigma. But there were still some cultivators who believed that there was something wrong with the place, and they would occasionally go there, hoping that luck would allow them to find some clues that no one else was able to. Time passed slowly like that. Su Ming remained sitting cross-legged in the cave abode. The tremors from the ground and mountains in the world outside had caused a large number of cracks to appear in the cave abode as well. It seemed like it was about to crumble, but in the end, it did not collapse. However, it did look to be in a rather pathetic state. Su Ming continued sitting on the cushion through it all. He had his eyes closed and was immersed in meditation. He had not left the place because the person who appeared in the ancient mirror was Xianxia. If he did not settle this matter, Su Ming would not get out. Behind him was the ice gate, and at that moment, the 5 white dogs stayed guard outside it while waiting for his return. Days passed, and in the blink of an eye, a year went by. During it, Su Ming had only opened his eyes twice. The first time he did so was half a year after the event. When he opened his eyes, he looked into the ancient mirror, and who he saw was still Xianxia, dressed in a black robe and sitting on his feng shui compass. Then, Su Ming closed his eyes, and when another half a year went by, he had already meditated in the cave abode for a full year. At that time, he opened his eyes again, and who he saw was still Xianxia. In silence, Su Ming stood up slowly from the feng shui compass on the ground. He took off the red thread and threw it on the ground, and when he looked at the ancient mirror again, who he saw was no longer Xianxia, but neither was it Wang Dao. He saw himself. "If I want your treasures, then I will have to become you." When Su Ming said those words faintly, a brilliant light shone in his eyes. He had not gone out because he was not Xianxia. If he did not resolve the problem he saw in the ancient mirror, it would become a thought buried deep in his heart, which was not appropriate for him. There was another reason for it as well. Be it the space whip or the feng shui compass, Su Ming needed time to refine them. He could already predict that when he turned those 2 treasures into his own possessions, when he looked at the ancient mirror again, he would no longer see Xianxia, but himself. While remaining silent, Su Ming sat down on the feng shui compass. Once he closed his eyes, he spread out his cultivation base to fuse it with the feng shui compass beneath him. At the same time, the third eye at the center of his brow opened. His Tao spirit in the eye formed a seal with its hands, and immediately, an invisible ball of fire spread out from Su Ming's body to begin his process of refining the feng shui compass. Su Ming's will also filled the entire cave abode and fused with his cultivation base as well as his Tao spirit to turn into a power that belonged solely to him. It began an unprecedented process of refinement on the feng shui compass. Time passed gradually. When Su Ming had been refining the compass for 10 years in the cave abode as if he was going through a process of isolated training, not many cultivators could be seen any longer among the mountains in the world outside. 10 years might not be long, but far too many people had their journey rewarded with nothing after they came. The tremors that happened 10 years before were gradually being forgotten. But there were still some persistent cultivators who did not want to leave the place. Only when another 10 years passed, they left with regret in their hearts. When Su Ming had isolated himself in the cave abode for a total of 30 years, the mountains in the southwestern region of ancient region returned to the old times, when there would seldom be people who visited the area. It became a very quiet place, just like in the past. Su Ming opened his eyes. At the moment he did so, he looked at the ancient mirror. The first thing he saw was still Xianxia, but when he cast a second glance, he saw himself. Right then, about 2/10 of the feng shui compass had been refined by him. Su Ming was not in a hurry. He closed his eyes again and immersed himself in the process of refinement. When another 30 years passed and he had been in isolation for a total of 60 years, 5/10 of the feng shui compass had been refined. When he looked at the ancient mirror again, he saw a blurry figure as a result of his own image overlapping with Xianxia's. No divine sense could extend into the mountains where the cave abode was located. Unless someone set up a rune, it would be impossible for them to even relocate to that place, much less send any divine thoughts there. Hence, no one besides 7 Moons sect knew about Su Ming being in there. All the thousands of disciples who had left the area all those years ago had their memories of that place wiped off by the great sect elders the moment they returned to the sect, and because of it, only 13 people knew that Su Ming was in the cave abode. Those 13 people were naturally the 13 great sect elders. They locked down all information about Su Ming and waited quietly for the day he egressed. Time passed, and when another cycle of 60 years passed and Su Ming had been refining the feng shui compass for 120 years while he isolated himself in the cave abode, he opened his eyes and looked at the ancient mirror. At that moment, he no longer saw Xianxia, but himself. He could not completely refine the feng shui compass, but he had refined 9/10 of it. The final 1/10 seemed to have been sealed, and no matter how Su Ming refined it, he could not make it fuse with his brand. Yet even so, this could not be considered to be a burden in his heart, which was why Su Ming lifted his right hand from the feng shui compass and grabbed the red thread he had taken off his wrist 100-something years ago. The red thread immediately at his right hand and bound itself on his wrist, and when Su Ming looked at the ancient mirror, he saw Xianxia again. Su Ming calmly closed his eyes and began the process of refining the red thread formed by the space whip. Like that, another cycle of 60 years went by. When Su Ming had isolated himself in the cave abode for a total of 4 cycles of 60 years, he opened his eyes again, and the person who appeared in the ancient mirror was him. As he stared at the image of himself, a dark light shone in his eyes, and he stood up slowly. The 4 cycles of 60 years is quite a long time, but since I could refine 9/10 of the space whip and this feng shui compass, it was worth it. Su Ming lowered his head to cast a glance at his right wrist. Then, when he turned around to look at the ice gate, he lifted his right hand and gave a casual swing in its direction. With it, the originally bright sky beyond the mountains instantly turned dark. The stars in the sky looked to be connected with one another. In a flash, an illusory whip appeared in Su Ming's hand. At the moment it touched the ice gate, booming sounds echoed in the air, and the ice gate fell apart to reveal the 5 white dogs who were looking at Su Ming at that moment. "Let's go." When Su Ming spoke, a feng shui compass appeared beneath his feet. He could change its size at will, and right then, it was only the size of a cushion, allowing him to stand on it. He then turned into a long arc and charged into the distance. Chapter 1432. I am Shu Hui. There were 3 long arcs beyond the millions of mountains at that moment. One of them was in front of the other 2, and they were slicing through the air as they charged forward. The one in the front was a woman. Her face was pale, but it only emphasized her delicate beauty. She was incredibly beautiful. In fact, it could be said that she was more charming than beautiful. The faint moles on her neck and the corners of her lips only increased her charm. Right then, there was panic in her eyes as she charged forward. There were 2 middle-aged men chasing after her. They had aloof expressions, and when they attacked, their attacks were filled with killing intent. While chasing after her, they gradually approached the millions of mountains in the southwestern region. "Fellow Daoist Shu, you can't escape after stealing something from our sect," one of the 2 people said faintly, and his voice resounded through the air. "Your young master personally gave me this item. There's no such thing as me stealing it." The woman snorted coldly. When she spoke, her eyes shone, and she charged to the millions of mountains ahead of her. She had long since known of the strangeness in this area, and she knew that divine thoughts and divine senses would be oppressed greatly there. If she could widen the distance between herself and her pursuers before losing them, it would be difficult for them to find her again. It's useless even if you run into the millions of mountains. The 2 of us are only the first batch of people to come after you. You should know that there are plenty of other sect disciples behind us. They have already received the order to chase you down and are on the way, the middle-aged man to the right said faintly. While speaking, he suddenly lifted his right hand. Several huge scorpions instantly flew out of his sleeve. Those scorpions did not have any corporeal bodies, but were formed by fog. If anyone looked at them, they would think that they had been drawn on a piece of paper with ink. At the moment they flew out, they let out piercing screeches and charged at the woman. The woman's face turned pale. When the scorpions approached her, she formed a seal with her hands, then pointed backwards. The figure of a scorpion instantly appeared behind her. It screeched and collided with the scorpions rushing at the woman. A loud bang shot up, forming waves of impact that swept outwards in every direction. With those waves, the woman's speed instantly increased exponentially. However, her pursuers behind her cast some unknown art. Because of it, their speed did not slow down, but had instead become faster. The 3 of them instantly appeared among the millions of mountains in 3 long arcs and sliced through the sky as they charged forward. When the 2 men saw that the woman ahead of them had charged into the mountains where divine senses would be suppressed, they did not show any hesitation. Instead, cold sneers appeared on their lips. The moment the middle-aged men sneered at the woman and she stepped into the mountains, dozens of long arcs appeared out of nowhere in front of her. All of them charged straight at her. As her expression changed, more long arcs appeared in the distant sky to her left and right. There were long arcs all around her, and they formed an encirclement. The woman narrowed her eyes. At that moment, a crazed laughter rang out in the air. Hundreds of cultivators had appeared in the sky. A dozen of them were carrying a palanquin with a huge seat, and sitting on it was a young man in a pink robe. There were 5 scantily dressed female cultivators around him, and they were embracing him while staring at the woman named Shu coldly. You BTCH, you took my treasure and still refuse to become my furnace? I'd like to see how you'll escape this time. Once I capture you, I will have my way with you in this place. Don't worry. I won't kill you. I will give you to the people who followed me to this place. The young man had a handsome face, but his expression was ferocious. A cold glare shone in his eyes, and when he spoke, he exuded an unseen arrogant air. Remember this, I want her alive. The face of the woman named Shu turned even paler. She gritted her teeth, then moved. Immediately, black fog surrounded her, and the shadow of a huge scorpion manifested. At the same time, she fled downwards, but no matter how fast she was, there were hundreds of cultivators surrounding her. They immediately laughed coldly and flew out together. Like a net that covered the entire sky, they forced the woman named Shu to the ground. She could simply not flee from her predicament. When she was forced to the ground, she would be caught in a net like an overturned bowl, and there would simply be no chance for her to escape. She knew it clearly, but there were hundreds of cultivators around her, blocking her way no matter which path she chose, and with those obstructions, she would instantly surrounded. There was only one path before her, and it was the way down, but there was also a limit to that path, unless there was no end as she descended downwards, but that was clearly impossible. However, right then, when the woman named Shu was filled with anxiety and the cultivators in the area forced her to descend to the ground, she suddenly saw a black-robed cultivator standing on a summit of one of the many mountains below her. That cultivator had long hair that danced in the mountain breeze, and there were 5 white dogs behind him. Needless to say, it was Su Ming. At the instant the woman named Shu saw the cultivator, she felt her heart thump in dread, but when she looked closely, she found that she had never seen him in the sect before. A thought appeared in her heart, and as she charged forward, she immediately spoke. Brother Zhong, help me. After shouting that, she changed direction and charged straight at Su Ming. The young man sitting in the chair in the sky ate a celestial fruit given to him by one of the women beside him and shouted arrogantly, as I thought, that BTCH is someone waiting for her in this place. Kill him. Kill. I want that BTCH alive, as for the rest, kill. Right when he said those words, a dozen people split up from the hundreds of people chasing after the woman named Shu and charged toward Su Ming. When the woman named Shu saw this, she immediately made a decision in her heart. The image of the scorpion behind her collapsed with a bang and turned into a wave of impact that swept up her body to make her instantly draw close to the mountain where Su Ming was. Once she appeared behind him, she did not stop but instead spoke quickly. Brother Zhong, run. I buried the item in the place you requested. We'll meet in the spot we agreed on previously. After saying that, she felt smug and thought that the person could only be considered to be unlucky. She hoped that he could attract some people after him so she could have a chance to escape. There were plenty of loopholes in her act. It was nothing worth mentioning, but right then, it was a critical moment, and her act served to be slightly useful. But right when she spoke, a calm voice reached her ears. Leaving just like this? The woman named Shu had been about to flee, but her body suddenly froze, and she found herself bound by an invisible power. She could not move even an inch forward and was forced to stop behind Su Ming. This scene immediately caused her expression to change drastically. At that moment, the hundreds of cultivators in the area closed in on them and surround the mountain on which Su Ming stood. None of the hundreds of cultivators were in Tao divinity realm. In fact, they were not even in Avacania realm, and the female cultivator was just in void turbulent realm. When the mountain was surrounded, Su Ming did not bother about the people in the area. Instead, he turned around and looked at the pale-faced woman named Shu. She stared back at him in shock. At that moment, if she still did not know that Su Ming's level of cultivation had far surpassed hers, it would have been impossible for her to have survived in ancient Zong for that long. Senior. When she spoke, the cultivators around them attacked Su Ming. They were grossly overestimating their own strength, and the moment they attacked, White 3 the one with the missing leg barked at the sky while standing among the other white dogs beside Su Ming. Its bark shook the sky and earth, sounding as if thunder had roared. The sky and earth tumbled about, clouds crumbled, and so did the hundreds of cultivators in the area. Banging sounds shot up along with a blood-red fog. At that instant, all the cultivators had been reduced to blood mist due to the shock they received from the bark. The scene shocked and intimidated the woman named Shu, and the young man in the palanquin shudder as well. The bodies of the women around him broke down at that moment, and his body was dyed red by fresh blood. He let out a shrill scream, and 4 figures manifested around him. They were 4 old men, and their expressions were incredibly solemn while their eyes sparkled. The presence of those in Tao Divinity Realm spread out from their bodies. They were all powerful warriors in the first level of Tao Divinity Realm. Senior, please save me. I've been forced to a corner by these ruffians and had to resort to seeking shelter from you. I hope that you will not blame me. In truth, I've been driven into a corner, the woman named Shu immediately pleaded. Her voice quivered slightly, which was a telling sign that she had been completely intimidated. What's your name? After glancing at the woman behind him, Su Ming sighed quietly in his heart. Her appearance was identical to that of Shu Hui. Even her moles were the same. I am Shu Hui, the woman named Shu quickly said. She felt incredibly nervous, and her nervousness grew even more when she looked at the white dogs who had previously appeared unassuming. With just one bark, one of them had killed hundreds of people. The shock she received from seeing that was too great. And there were 5 of such dogs around him. Can you drink? Su Ming closed his eyes and hid the sadness as well as the reminiscence in his eyes. The woman named Shu was momentarily stunned. She hesitated for a moment, but before she could answer, Su Ming had already opened his eyes. Drink with me once, and I will help solve this predicament. The moment he said it, he turned around and swung his sleeve. The 5 white dogs beside him immediately flew out and charged at the sky. The young man in the chair turned stark pale. When he screamed, the pupils of the 4 old men around him shrank. A strong sense of life-threatening danger rose in the old men, and they did not dare to attack. Instead, they grabbed the young man, turned around, and tried to escape. But the 4 old men did not stand a chance against the 5 white dogs. The dogs instantly caught up, and shrill screams of pain rang out. How dare you harm me? I am the son of the great sect elder of Cloud Civ sect. My father is a Tao paragon. The young man's speech turned into a scream of pain. It soon disappeared, and the 5 white dogs returned to Su Ming's side. The young man's pale head was in White Five's mouth. Chapter 1433. Thank you, but you are not her. The young man's head was thrown by Su Ming's side. White Five let out a whine that Shu Hui could not understand, but the other 4 white dogs could. I'm also a Tao paragon. This was what White Five had said. I'm also a Tao paragon. Darn it all, if you lot are Tao paragons, then I'm a Tao paragon as well. All 5 white dogs whined at that moment, then laid down on their stomachs beside Su Ming and fiddled with the young man's head. Shu Hui sucked in a sharp breath, and her face turned even paler. When she looked at Su Ming, her gaze was filled with indescribable terror. The life and death pursuit she thought would certainly kill her had been easily resolved by Su Ming, but more importantly, he had not even attacked. The white dogs alone had done everything. Shu Hui had been able to recognize the 4 old men beside the young man. They were sect elders from Cloud Civ sect, and their cultivation bases were practically over the roof. They were in Tao Divinity Realm, the stage that surpassed Avacania Realm. Shu Hui did not know their precise level of cultivation, but to her, those 4 old men were powerful entities equivalent to the will of heaven. If she knew that they had been there since the beginning, she probably would have lost the courage to flee. However, those 4 were sent to protect the young man and would not bother to deal with her. Yet those powerful warriors had been easily ripped apart by the white dogs of the person before her. Even the men's souls were destroyed, which filled Shu Hui's heart with indescribable fear. Senior. Shu Hui trembled. Only when she spoke did she notice that she had regained mobility. Su Ming sat down on a mountain rock. When he lifted his right hand, a few pots of wine appeared in front of him. They were all what he had prepared for the old man. At that moment, when he brought them out, he raised his head to look at the woman who had the exact same face as the woman in his memories. Drink. Su Ming picked up a pot of wine and stared at the woman before him in a daze before he took a big swig. Shu Hui's face was pale, and she felt her skin crawl slightly from how Su Ming looked at her. He had such a high level of cultivation that he was the strongest person she had ever seen in her life. But his personality was very strange. He had actually asked her to drink wine. Also, there seemed to be a hint of sadness in his eyes, and that sadness made her think that he was thinking of someone else when he looked at her. Xu Hui, thus, gritted her teeth, picked up a pot of wine, and drank a mouthful as well. With it, a dash of red instantly appeared on her pale cheeks. When she put the pot of wine down, she quickly spoke. "Senior, I can't drink too much, I drink." Su Ming laughed while looking at Xu Hui before he picked up his pot and took a large gulp from it again. Damn it! Damn it! He might be a senior with unfathomable strength and have quite the pleasant face, but no matter what, he's an old monster. Could it be that HHE wants to make me drunk, and then use me as a furnace? Xu Hui felt conflicted in her heart, but she did not dare to refuse to drink. She quickly forced herself to smile, then gritted her teeth and drank another mouthful. With it, Xu Hai immediately felt a little tipsy. She might have quite a few urges when she practiced Tao, but she seldom drank. At that moment, she instinctively wanted to circulate her cultivation base, but when she saw that Su Ming did not do so, she became worried that once she did, it would cause the other to do something weird, what with his strange personality. A pitiful expression appeared on her face from the conflict in her heart. Su Ming also took another mouthful of wine from his pot. His gaze was fixated on Xu Hui. In his mind, he saw the times when he drank with Xu Hui in Divine Essence Star Ocean. Back then, his level of cultivation had not been as high, and his knowledge of the world was still incomplete. He still struggled against the forces of the world. But when he looked back, at that time, he was blessed, because everything that belonged to him was still around, and he was only separated from them by distance, unlike. Su Ming lowered his head, and anguish from remembering the past appeared in his eyes. He raised his wine pot and drank again. "Xu Hui, this time, I'll play fair and square," Su Ming mumbled. He had said those words softly, and the conflicted Xu Hui could not hear them. The pot of wine was still in her hands, and she did not know whether to put it down or continue holding it. An urge to throw all caution to the wind stirred in her, and she was about to tell Su Ming loudly that she did not drink when she caught sight of the 5 white dogs toying with the human head. That one glance instantly stole her courage, and she had a vague feeling that if she refused to drink, there was a high possibility that the 5 white dogs would get to play with 2 human heads. When Xu Hui thought of that, she felt indignant and decided to just raise her pot of wine and take a big swig from it. Once she finished drinking, she put down her pot and suddenly noticed Su Ming sway as if he could no longer handle the alcohol. This discovery immediately caused an idea to pop up in Xu Hui's head, and her spirits lifted. "Heh, I'll give it my all," she thought in her heart, and immediately put on a charming expression before picking up a pot of wine to deliver it to Su Ming. "Senior, thank you for saving my life. This is a toast of gratitude from me," Xu Hui said. She took a big gulp first, and her petite face grew even redder. Su Ming stared at her as if he was looking at the past and quietly drank. "Senior, meeting is fate itself. Come, let's drink again. Senior, I have to thank you for saving me. One more toast. Senior, I thank you for saving me again. Senior, let's not say anything else, let's just drink. Senior, I still don't know your name." The two of them drank mouthful after mouthful, and gradually, for pots of wine were emptied by them. Xu Hui was already drunk, but she found that even when she was drunk, she could still drink more. Instead, the senior, who had a strange personality and harbored malicious intent, became even drunker than her. This filled her with confidence. When Su Ming brought out another 4 pots of wine, the two of them continued drinking. At the time the sky gradually turned dark and was adorned by glittering stars, Xu Hui stared at Su Ming with a silly smile. "Drink up. Why aren't you drinking?" Su Ming was drunk. He had always been a lightweight, and he did not want to use his cultivation base to get rid of the effects of alcohol. On top of that, this time, he wanted to become drunk. He did not want to cheat. Under the moonlight, he stared at Xu Hui, and his vision seemed to have become blurry, causing him to be unable to tell whether they were in Divine Essence Star Ocean or Ancient Zong. "I'll drink. Last time, I didn't, but Xu Hui, this time, I will drink with you," Su Ming mumbled. He picked up a pot of wine and drank a huge mouthful from it. At that moment, Xu Hui finally became certain that the strange senior did really treat her as someone else. But she was curious why the senior named Su Ming would call out her own name even though he was seeing someone else through her. Could it be that his old friend is also called Shu Hui? When that thought appeared in her head, she spoke softly while feeling tipsy. Yeah, you didn't drink with me last time. I was the only one drinking, but you cheated. This time, you have to get drunk. When Su Ming heard it, he laughed. Did Mo Sho bring more wine here? Su Ming shouted with a laugh, but no one answered his call. The mountain where they sat was not the mountain in Divine Essence Star Ocean. There was no person called Mo Sho there. Su Ming fell silent and shook his head in anguish. He then brought out a few pots of wine himself and placed them by his side. When he did so, he sighed softly. If only life was as beautiful as it is in the beginning. This time, Shu Hui did hear his soft murmurs, and she stared at the senior who had been strange in her eyes. She saw sadness and grief in his eyes and how he seemed to be reminiscing about the past. She suddenly felt that the senior before her did not harbor any malicious thoughts. He only thought that she resembled his old friend after he saw her, which was why he had felt sentimental and asked her to drink with him. Perhaps there had been a woman whom she resembled at some point in the passage of time who also sat on a mountain and drank with him under the night sky. That time, he cheated and did not drink too much. Perhaps there was also a person called Mo Sho by his side at that time, which was why he called out to him. Shu Hui stared at Su Ming, and she gradually felt that he was a very pitiful man. She sighed softly. He saved me, so I will be his old friend for a while. When she thought of this, Shu Hui looked at Su Ming again, and a gentle look appeared in her eyes. Su Ming, she said softly. When she said those words, Su Ming's hand, which had picked up a pot of wine in anguish, came to a swift halt. He stared at her in a daze. Don't keep thinking about the past, please. Shu Hui said softly and looked at Su Ming gently. He stared back at her. At that instant, he could not quite tell who the person before him was. He slowly lifted his hand and touched the woman's face. You didn't finish drinking with me last time. This time, you did it. Don't keep reminiscing about the past and making yourself sad. If you do, I will be sad as well. Shu Hui said gently while looking at Su Ming. She did not know why, but her heart suddenly ached in pain. It was the first time she ever felt such pain in her life. Su Ming's hand swept past Shu Hui's face. When his hand fell, he closed his eyes. Time trickled by, and when the time it takes for one incense stick to burn passed, Su Ming opened his eyes, and when he looked at Shu Hui, a smile appeared on his face. Thank you, but you are not her. Shu Hui bit her bottom lip. Her original intent was to pretend to be Su Ming's old friend, but he had already woken up from his drunken stupor. Yet for a reason she did not understand herself, the pain in her heart had only grown stronger. Shu Hui was about to say something, but she did not know what to say or even where to begin. Thank you for drinking with me. Where is Cloud Civ Sect? Take me there, and I will help you get rid of your problems, Su Ming said softly while standing up. Shu Hui rose after him in a daze. When Su Ming looked over, he lifted his right hand, intending to help her dispel her drunkenness, but Shu Hui took a few steps backwards and shook her head. Cloud Civ Sect is about 7 days south from this place. Once she said that, she closed her eyes. Her body became limp, and she fell. Chapter 1434. Intending to cut without leaving any traces behind, Su Ming held Shu Hui, who had fallen unconscious due to being drunk. He stared at her rosy cheeks, and noticed that her originally sweet breath was now laced with alcohol. While lying in Su Ming's bosom, she let out faint whistles made by a sleeping person. Those sounds caused the ripples of memories to stir in Su Ming's heart. After standing quietly on the mountain for some time, he sighed softly. He then turned around and while holding Shu Hui charged into the south. The 5 white dogs immediately followed after him. They turned into 5 white rays of light that charged behind him. One of them, White 5, had a human head between its teeth. The journey of 7 days to Cloud Civ Sect was calculated based on Shu Hui's speed, but Su Ming could reach that place in an instant. Cloud Civ Sect was not one of the 7 sects, but one of the smaller sects under the 7. There were quite a number of small sects in ancient Zong, but most of them were not famous, such as Cloud Civ sect. The presence of a Dao paragon guarding it had only made it slightly reputable in the area. In just the time takes for 2 incense sticks to burn, Su Ming saw Cloud Civ sect in the distance. It was built on a mountain, and it looked quite extraordinary. There were green pines surrounding the sect, and a flight of stone stairs going down the mountain. Clouds and fog filled the area, and a huge hall could be vaguely seen at the summit. At the bottom, right before the mountain, there was a huge stone erected with 2 words carved on it, Cloud Civ. It was Cloud Civ sect. Su Ming turned his gaze away and lowered his head to cast a glance at Shu Hui in his arms. When he lifted his head, his gaze was aloof and callous. He bore no grudges against the sect himself, but if he ignored it, Shu Hui would certainly be chased down because of the deaths of the young man and the hundreds of cultivators. And it was impossible for Su Ming to take Shu Hui away. She was not the person in his memories, and it was impossible for him to form any sort of connection with her. If he did, it would only entangle him even more with the world and push him into losing himself one day. Before, he had thought it was not difficult to keep his mind clear. He could do it as long as he kept true to himself, but when he saw Shu Hui, he realized that it was not as easy as he thought. He should have found the people who had the exact same face and voice to the people in his memories to be incredibly familiar to him. But right then, when he looked at them, he found the barrier of unfamiliarity separating them. However, the people in his memories had died, but he could see them right before his eyes. It forced him to continuously tell himself that all he saw was fake, even if it felt so real that it was scary. And that was just with Shu Hui. If he ran into Fang Kang Lan, Yu Xian, his eldest senior brother, second senior brother, Hu Zi, and the others, Su Ming did not know whether he could bear to cut off all his ties with them. That was why when he faced Lan Lan of Seven Moons sect, Su Ming chose to keep as far away from her as possible. She bore the slightest hint of resemblance to Fang Kang Lan, and he did not know whether he could still keep true to his heart if he got closer to her. Would he become a pitiful man who would be unwilling to believe that everything was fake even though he knew that it was fake and would rather believe that everything around him was real? Su Ming knew himself well, and it was precisely because of it that he did everything he could to avoid the people he knew. He understood all too well that he was this sort of person. He sighed softly. When an aloof glare appeared in his eyes, he decided Cloud Civ sect's fate. It could not continue to exist. Only when it lost the ability to pursue Shu Hui could Su Ming leave her alone and cut off his ties with her. But he also knew that when he destroyed the sect, he would have already formed a connection with Shu Hui. The best possible thing for him to do was to let go of Shu Hui and turn a blind eye towards her survival, as if she was just a gust of fleeting wind, but he could not do so. In silence, Su Ming brought his right hand up and pointed at Cloud Civ sect. A fierce light lit up in the eyes of the 5 white dogs behind him. They turned into 5 long arcs that charged towards Cloud Civ sect. Only kill those who are above Avacania realm and the successor disciples of this sect. By the time Su Ming finished speaking, the 5 white dogs had already rushed into Cloud Civ sect. After a moment, booming sounds surged into the sky. Enraged roars as well as cries of surprise shot up, and a slaughter began in Cloud Civ sect. All cultivators above Avacania realm, the sect master, the successor disciples, and all of sect elders dyed the sky red with their blood on that night. When about an hour had passed and all 5 white dogs flew back, dozens of people Cloud Civ sect's sect master, sect elders, and successor disciples were killed. For a sect which numbered to nearly 10,000 people, the deaths of dozens of people should amount to nothing. But when those people formed the small circle that was the peak of the sect, it meant that sect would fall to ruin straight away. Su Ming lowered his head and cast a glance at Shu Hui again. When he took a step forward, he reached a mountain in the distance and put Shu Hui down. He stared at her quietly for a long while, then lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Glittering light landed on Shu Hui's body, and he left. When Su Ming left, Shu Hui's eyelashes fluttered. She slowly opened her eyes, and confusion appeared on her face, but she soon remembered what had happened and immediately got up to look around her, but besides the darkness of the night, she found nothing. She could vaguely remember drinking with someone. That person had later asked her where Cloud Civ sect was located, and then, she fainted. But once she woke up, she found that no matter how hard she tried to remember, she could not recall the face of the person who drank with her. Shu Hui scowled, then shook her head hard and turned into a long arc that left into the distance. Su Ming went away, leaving the southwestern region far behind him. He charged forth and did not stop all along the way, as if he wanted to leave Shu Hui far behind him, as well as the place where he met her, which had formed a connection with him that he could not sever. He discovered that the more he became immersed in the world, the more he felt that he could not keep his mind clear, but he still tried his best to keep true to his heart. When morning arrived, he saw 7 moons sect in the distance. "I've returned," Su Ming said softly. With one step, he vanished. When he reappeared, he was standing in the air above 7 moons sect. The moment he showed up there, all the runes were activated. Countless figures instantly appeared, and waves of divine senses locked down on him. 7 moons sect was clearly in a state of extreme caution. Once the divine senses swept past Su Ming, they did not lower their guard in the slightest. Even more waves of murderous intent showed up, but the next moment, a long string of laughter echoed in the air, and Jiyu Tai took huge strides forward to charge towards Su Ming from the 7th layer of sky beyond the sky. "How was it?" he immediately asked. There were around 10 long arcs charging behind him. Xu Zhongfan and Dao Han were among them. When Xu Zhongfan saw Su Ming, he immediately smiled. He looked distinctly older, and there were more wrinkles on his forehead, as if he had been constantly frowning over the last couple years. Once he saw Su Ming, the wrinkles on his forehead evened out. Only Dao Han's pupils shrank at the instant he saw Su Ming. His main focus was on the 5 white dogs beside him. Once he scrutinized them, a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. When he turned his gaze back to Su Ming, he had a vague feeling that the 3rd prince before him had become vastly different after they hadn't seen him for 200-something years. This was not a feeling brought forth by his cultivation base, but his instincts. They told him that if he attacked, he might not be able to overpower the 3rd prince. He was not the only one who felt this way though. At that moment, the other great sect elders beside Jiyu Tai all had that feeling when they looked at Su Ming. "I've taken all of them." Su Ming nodded at Jiyu Tai. "All right, you came back at the right time. I was worried that you would miss the fight over the Phala of Dao verification. Right now, there are a few more decades before it starts. Since you reaped some good rewards this time, you must slaughter your way to fame in the fight over the Phala of Dao verification. In that battle, the very first competition of the successors will be launched between 7 Moon Sect, 1 Dao Sect, and Azura Clan. We will fight before the Phala, and you will fight in it. We will be fighting for the path of Dao verification, and you will be fighting against the other prodigies of the other sects for the Phala of Dao verification. In the past, the respective camps from the 7 sects and 12 clans would dye the sky and earth with fresh blood when they fought, for only then did the path of Dao verification opens. But right now, 7 Moons Sect has formed an alliance with 2 sects and 3 clans. The battle this time will certainly be much greater and more vicious than in the past. When Jiyu Tai spoke, he stared at Su Ming with bright, burning eyes. He too had clearly noticed the difference in Su Ming, but he could see much more than the others. The 5 white dogs around him were secondary. What Jiyu Tai cared about was Su Ming's right hand. The red thread tied to his wrist filled Jiyu Tai with apprehension, and the brand of the crescent moon that occasionally showed up on his palm caused his eyes to shrink. Hidden within them was a hint of shock. "This brand is..." Jiyu Tai sucked in a sharp breath, and a smile lit up at the corners of his lips. A strong wave of excitement appeared on his face. He had managed to recognize where that brand came from. Su Ming nodded and wrapped his fist in his palm towards Jiyu Tai and the others. After he cast a glance at Xu Zhongfan, he took a step forward and stepped into the 6th layer of sky beyond the sky. "If that's the case, I will need to enter isolated training to nourish my enchanted treasures. Senior Jiyu Tai, Teacher Xu, please wake me up on the day of Dao verification." When Su Ming said those words, Xu Zhongfan immediately looked excited. It was the first time that Su Ming had addressed him as teacher. While he might not have addressed him as master but as Teacher Xu, it was already enough for Xu Zhongfan. Jiyu Tai watched Su Ming leave into the distance, and his smile grew wider. There was great confidence on his face. He believed that even though Su Ming appeared to only be in Dao spirit realm at that moment, his combat abilities would surely be able to threaten even Dao paragons. If he can enter Dao spirit realm, he will be the strongest among all under great Tao paragons. This day is far from us. When the path of Tao verification is opened and he enters it, with his tactics, intelligence, and combat prowess, there is a high chance that he will obtain the phala of Tao verification. Once he has it and eats it, he will become a Tao paragon. Jiu Tai said softly with hope shining in his eyes. Besides, he has that brand, and it has been formed by what could be called one of the most terrifying divine abilities in all of ancient Zong. Chapter 1435. The legend of the Emperor of Ancient Zong. The phala of Tao verification came from the tree of Tao verification. That tree was not in ancient Zong, but in a shattered dimension. Legends had it that the Tao verification art did not belong to ancient Zong in the distant past. However, the Emperor of ancient Zong had used his power of boundless Tao realm to tear apart space and step into the world that practically all the cultivators in ancient Zong found incredibly mysterious even up to this date. In fact, there were quite a lot of people who still did not know that it even existed. That world proclaimed itself to be the beginning of the universe and was the homeland of the tree of Tao verification. It was a huge tree that reached the heavens and provided nourishment to all the lives in that world, giving rise to countless powerful warriors. There were 9 continents in that world, and on each continent was a butterfly. They were the spirits of the continents and existences that were the same state of being as the tree of Tao verification. They served as the pillars of support, allowing the lives on the continents to multiply. The Emperor of ancient Zong's entry had immediately caught the attention of the beings in that world. A huge war broke out, and the Emperor of ancient Zong fought against the strongest of that world, a powerful warrior named Go Hong. They had engaged in an astonishing battle of arts. The details of the battle were recorded in ancient scrolls that no one could read except for the members of the royal family, and even then, those of the royal family harboring secrets and who were not emperors could not read them. They only knew that the Emperor of ancient Zong returned with grave injuries while dragging with him the tree of Tao verification. He left the tree in the tunnel connecting ancient Zong and that world, which then became a shattered dimension. After that, the phala of Tao verification from the tree became a supreme treasure that all the cultivators of ancient Zong sought for at least once in their lives. As for the Emperor of ancient Zong, once he returned to the royal capital, he chose to enter isolated training. After several tens of thousands of years, the princes of that time incidentally discovered that cracks had appeared on the Emperor of ancient Zong's life plate, and in their shock, they immediately gathered the entire royal family together to activate the chamber where the Emperor of ancient Zong isolated himself, only to discover that the Emperor of ancient Zong had disappeared from his tightly sealed isolation grounds. That was a legend recorded on a jade slip, and Su Ming held it in his hand. He sat at the 6th layer of sky beyond the sky and stared at the jade slip that recorded the origin of the tree of Tao verification. It was an item Jiu Tai had delivered to him. Su Ming's expression was calm as he held the jade slip, but a huge storm raged in his heart due to the words on it. His breathing became slightly faster while he held the jade slip and sat in the 6th layer. Gradually, he became unable to keep his gaze calm, so he chose to close his eyes. But even though he could close his eyes, he could not quell the storm in his heart. It had turned into a loud sound that continuously roared in his mind. That world has 9 continents, and there are 9 butterflies who serve as the spirits of those continents. If these 9 butterflies are harmonious Morus alba, Su Ming opened his eyes swiftly. Then that explains harmonious Morus alba's origin. When an accident happened to that world or it crumbled, the 9 spirits fled. They flew through the endless vast expanse in search for a place suitable enough to serve as their home. In the end, one of the harmonious Morus alba became tired, and when it rested in the vast expanse, a world was born in its wings. Su Ming's eyes shone with a contemplative light. Emperor of ancient Zong. Is there a possibility that Xianxia is in truth not the 3rd prince, but the Emperor of ancient Zong? Su Ming's eyes shrank swiftly. The Emperor of ancient Zong fought against Go Hong, the strongest of that world. The Emperor might have won, destroyed that world, and killed Go Hong, but he also paid the price of being so gravely injured that he almost died. Once he returned to the ancient Zong of that time, he wanted to recover from his injuries, but in the end, he could not do so, and so his life plate shattered. But he was not willing to die just like that, which was why he cast some unknown divine ability before sitting down on the feng shui compass with the 9 reverse spirit pearls in his hand and went to absorb harmonious Morus alba in the vast expanse. He searched for the reversed spirits, because he's aiming to resurrect himself. When Su Ming thought of that, his eyes shone brilliantly. A huge storm raged in his heart. He had realized that if his guess was real, then in truth, he might seem to be possessing Xianxia at that moment, but in truth, he was on the verge of losing, because he was not fighting against Xianxia, but the third prince. In fact, he did not even know his real identity, so how could he even dream of the day when he would successfully possess him? This discovery immediately caused cold sweat to break out on Su Ming's forehead. His grip around the jade slip tightened, and he gradually narrowed his eyes. In silence, he chose to bury the matter deep in his heart so that it would become one of his many assumptions. Then, he put away the jade slip and slowly closed his eyes. There was no need for Su Ming to rush it. He knew that he could not make a mistake in this step. If he did, he would no longer be himself. He was attempting the most difficult possession in his life, and he could not afford to make any mistakes. He had to think about each of his decisions and resolutions carefully before he could take a step forward, because he could no longer turn back from this path. If he succeeded, he knew he would become Xianxia. When he opened his eyes, he would see the vast expanse and the hope to resurrect all the people in his memories. If he failed, Su Ming knew that he would no longer be himself. Instead, Xianxia would be the one who would open his eyes. Time trickled by, and decades passed while Su Ming meditated in the sixth layer of seven moon sect sky beyond the sky. As time flowed into the distance like a stream of water, the day when the tree of Tao verification would bear fruit drew closer. On the autumn of 1 year, Su Ming opened his eyes in the sixth layer of sky beyond the sky and watched the rain fall from the sky, bringing a cooling breeze with it. He watched the rain pour on the ground, and in his third eye, the fourth overlapping shadow of his Tao spirit was no longer completely blurry. Instead, its outline could be seen. If no external force arrived to help with its manifestation, then while it would take time, Su Ming could still use his own power to completely form his fourth Tao spirit. When the autumn rain poured on the world outside, bell tolls echoed from the distance in Seven Moon Sect. There was an ancient tone to that sound, and it stirred up ripples in the sky and earth, making the autumn rain tremble. All the cultivators in Seven Moons Sect lifted their heads. Nearly 6/10 of Seven Moons Sect's elite cultivators, numbering to more than 200,000, turned into countless long arcs that rose into the sky of Seven Moons Sect. Jiu Tai, Shuzhong Fan, Dao Han, all 13 great sect elders took action. Most of the sect elders also followed them. With the 200,000 cultivators, they rose into the sky while it was the season of autumn rain in the world. At the same time, a dark cloud appeared under their feet. It was huge and covered the ground as well as Seven Moons Sect, which meant that all of the 200,000 cultivators could sit on it. Lightning flashed in the cloud, which had a powerful and mighty pressure. The item, which seemed like a dark cloud, was in truth an extremely powerful enchanted treasure of Seven Moons Sect. Besides the power it had, it could also move through the heavens and earth. It could bring the cultivators of Seven Moons Sect to the battle of Tao verification. Su Ming. Jiu Tai's ancient voice echoed in the sixth layer of sky beyond the sky, and Su Ming slowly stood up. It is time. We will accompany you to the battle of Tao verification. At the instant Jiu Tai's voice rang out, the 200,000-something cultivators all voiced their obedience. They spoke in unison, and when their voices rang out, they were like the roars of the world that shook the skies. The next moment, a feng shui compass appeared under Su Ming's feet, and he turned into a long arc that charged into the sky. The 5 white dogs followed after him. All of them instantly broke out of the sixth layer of sky beyond the sky to appear in front of the dark cloud. With a single step, they stepped on it. The moment Su Ming arrived, the dark cloud let out a loud rumble and instantly rushed forward, leaving behind an afterimage of its figure in the sky above Seven Moons Sect. By then, its true form had already left far into the distant sky. The afterimage only disappeared after a long while, and during that time, countless rays of light from runes appeared inside and outside Seven Moons Sect. All of them had been activated at that moment. When the runes were put to use, Seven Moons Sect hid itself from the land. If anyone looked over, they would only see mountains. The dark cloud charged forth in the sky, and it was so quick that it instantly covered an incredible distance. The 200,000 cultivators sitting on the dark cloud were all silent, but the murderous intent in their eyes grew stronger with each passing moment. They knew that they were going to the battle of Dao verification among the 7 sects and 12 clans that happened once in a blue moon. However, right then, due to the competition between the successors, the level of devastation and the subsequent tragedy they would have to suffer would be much greater than in the past. But, if they won and were not killed, then once they emerged as the victors of the competition between the successors, all those who participated in the battle would have a kismet bestowed upon them, and their levels of cultivation would increase by leaps and bounds. That kismet would be the kismet of the competition between successors, the kismet of ancient Zong. All 7 sects and 12 clans in ancient Zong conducted similar acts as 7 Moon sect. As the light from their enchanted treasures shone, the cultivators from each sect and clan charged towards the royal capital at the center of ancient Zong from all directions in the country. The shattered dimension with the tree of Dao verification was divided into 3 layers. Only when one stepped into the 3rd layer would they be able to enter the dimension where the tree of Dao verification was located. The first to enter would gain the upper hand over others. The 1st and the 2nd layer were where the 7 sects and 12 clans waged the battle of Dao verification for the right to enter the 3rd layer. A devastating slaughter would happen each time the battle of Dao verification was held because everyone was aiming for the larger Phala. The smaller Phala was only of secondary importance to them. The larger Phala was a reversed spirit pearl, a treasure that could protect a sect or clan. It was a legendary item, and legends had it, that its greatest use was to allow a person to gain enlightenment to break through the limits of Great Dao Paragon and become a 9th level Dao God. And the more reversed spirit cores a person had, the more chances they would get to gain that enlightenment. This was something the Emperor in the royal capital had acknowledged and announced to the world. The item did indeed have that effect, but it would vary depending on the person and the number of pearls they had.